A former governor of Illinois now plans to sue the state for a chance to seek public office again. And the recent increases in cases of COVID-19 bring different reactions from the governors of Iowa and Illinois. We'll get to all of that this morning with former Iowa Republican Party Chair Steve Grubbs and former Rock Island Mayor Mark Schwiebert, a Democrat. Great to see both of you as always. Let's get right to it. I'm going to start with Illinois. Governor J.B. Pritzker issued an executive order Wednesday in response to the growing cases of COVID-19's Delta variant in his state. It does a few things. A mask mandate now in place for students and all employees at schools. This does include private schools that get government money. The same goes for daycare facilities in Illinois and long-term care operations, regardless of vaccination status. Pritzker's order also requires all employees in round-the-clock state-owned facilities to be vaccinated against COVID-19 by October 4th. This goes for places like veterans' homes, correctional facilities, juvenile justice centers, and more. Pritzker points out the rate of hospitalizations and intensive care bed occupancy in the state more than doubled in a month. So here we go again. Unfortunately, how effective do you think this action will be to get the desired result of more vaccinations? Mark?
Well, I think it's going to serve as a spur to people getting vaccinated because it is going to sort of isolate folks who are having to wear the face mask because they haven't chosen to take that sensible precaution. I think we've seen across the country, even in states where there have been holdouts on the vaccines, that really is the thing that needs to be done here, and it's widely recognized that that is the most effective treatment for it. Unfortunately, there are still enough holdouts in pockets of the country and even pockets of Illinois and Iowa where people haven't done that the masking requirement is going to be needed, partly because, of course, children under 12 still aren't eligible for vaccines, can't receive it as of yet, and then partly because a shockingly large proportion, in my feeling, haven't gotten the vaccines despite their availability and their proven effectiveness. So I think what Governor Pritzker is doing is, as he has done throughout this process, trying to stay ahead of the curve. Sometimes that's put us at a little disadvantage to our neighbors because it hasn't been quite as convenient, but it has resulted in a COVID rate between Rock Island and Scott counties of roughly 2 to 1 in Scott County versus Rock Island County, and I think part of that's because of the added precautions that are being taken. So it's inconvenient, and I hope we can get past it, but my other hope is that we'll get these vaccines out there more widely so we can all get past the masking and better return to normal.
Steve, how bold do you see Pritzker's move, and what's the likelihood of it being effective in that goal?
Well, if you look at the 12-month chart that the New York Times puts out, that they update regularly, Iowa and Illinois, you'll see there's almost no difference between the two states when you look at the 12-month view. And so the reality is Illinois' approach has not worked better than Iowa's approach, except that Iowa's approach has left Iowa in a much stronger economic position so that we're in a better place to fund our schools and to fund our infrastructure, that type of thing. But here's the positive outlook. We have a system of federalism. We're a republic, so Iowa can do its thing, Illinois can do its thing. We don't have to have a federal mandate telling every state what to do. And my preference, I want to live in a state like Iowa or Missouri or Texas. I don't want to live in a state like Illinois that's locked down that much. And I have that freedom to do so. And frankly, I think we're going to continue to see people vote with their feet and choose states that have more freedom instead of less.
Well, let's get to that different approach in Iowa, because while J.B. Pritzker is following CDC recommendations, Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds remains mask averse. Now remember, Iowa passed laws that prevent local governments from adopting their own mask mandates. She maintains telling fully vaccinated Iowans to now wear masks is not only counterproductive to our vaccination efforts, but also not grounded in reality or common sense. That's a quote from her. That was after the CDC's new recommendations. Reynolds goes on to say the vaccine remains our strongest tool to combat COVID-19, and goes on to add that she trusts Iowans to do the right thing. Well, Iowa doesn't have a great track record really when it comes to vaccinations. It's 49.8% for the state overall. Scott County has about 48% of its population fully vaccinated. Now, if you go back to the Spanish flu pandemic more than 100 years ago, the second year was worse than the first. And one of my favorite quotes comes from philosopher George Santayana: "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." Governor Reynolds believes getting vaccinated is the best way to stop the virus, but she won't issue a mask mandate. Okay, that's fine. She trusts Iowans to do the right thing, but the numbers might not necessarily reflect enough of them are. More companies we are seeing are requiring vaccines. Can Reynolds afford to maintain this position? What about a vaccine mandate for state employees in Iowa? Steve?
I can't actually believe you asked that question. Can Iowa afford it? The question is, can Illinois afford to continue down their path?
Because well, we're not talking about shutting down businesses, though.
So So first of all, I just looked at Iowa, Illinois' vaccination rates. There's very little difference between the two. So that's number one. Number two, the results between Iowa and Illinois over the last 12 months, very little difference, except again in the financial position. And then third, you said CDC recommendations. Well, what week are you talking about? They keep changing them, not based on science, but it seems to be based on whim. And even national Democrats have pointed that out. When they just made their most recent recommendation, they said, oh, don't wear face masks. Now they say, do wear face masks. Democrats were asking, what science are you basing this on? Because it's changing on a whim. So frankly, the CDC's doctors and infectious disease experts have nothing on the doctors and infectious disease experts in the state of Iowa. We have some of the best in the nation. Who would I rather rely on? The Washington CDC, who seems to be changing their mind regularly, or the Iowa experts? It's pretty obvious to me.
Mark, your response?
Yeah, I think that's kind of an interesting thing, because I think that if you do look at the experts locally, you're seeing more and more of them requiring a vaccine, despite the fact the Republican Party nationally and in many states, including Iowa, until recently, have been resistant towards pushing for the vaccine. It is clearly the most effective way of treating it. I think it's also interesting that Steve points out that, you know, we're a federal nation in which states have control over what they do within their territories. But that seems to be applied selectively, because when it comes to local governments being able to do things, the Iowa legislature, which is dominated by the Republicans, has passed legislation effectively to prevent local governments from taking reasonable precautions they feel are necessary, including mask mandates in the grade schools, which is critically necessary because kids under 12 obviously can't be vaccinated. So although I think it's nice that the Republicans nationally have come around to recognizing what's been recognized by everyone else for many months, that vaccines are the effective way of dealing with it, it's regrettable that in some of the states they're standing in the way of local health experts who are recommending this be done. 70 of the nation's leading health systems have all required now that their employees have vaccines. That's something that local health experts are endorsing, as well as the CDC. CDC have been recognized traditionally as the authority on these matters, and they are informed by epidemiologists and others in this area, and they're following what local health experts are doing as well. We simply have to get on top of this, and that means allowing the experts to be controlled, not some political issue such as is happening in Texas and Florida, where the numbers are way up because they've been resistant to what the experts are recommending. The only way we're going to get back to normal and having a healthy economic situation is by taking reasonable precautions and following science. And unfortunately, there's a certain cadre of people, mostly Republicans, I have to say, who are resistant to doing that. And that's what's got us in the mess we're in now.
We are tight on time. Those of you watching at home, we're going to continue this conversation online at ourquadcities.com. Now our question of the week. What do you think about Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker's executive order for a mask mandate in schools and a COVID-19 vaccine requirement for state employees? Send your answer by email to fortherecord at WHBF.com or respond to this post on Facebook at the Local 4 News WHBF TV page or on my page.